In the name of God, Creator, light and life, Amen. Crown Sydney is the huge, relatively new skyscraper in Barangaroo, as many of you are aware. Inside its sleek, dark exterior is a hotel and residential apartments and a casino. It stands 271 metres high, and with 75 floors, it's the tallest building in Sydney and the fourth tallest building in Australia. The Crown cost $2.2 billion to build, and most of us are aware of the criticism and controversies that have surrounded it all the way along in its planning, development, and operating. As Jesus came out of the temple, one of his disciples said to him, "Look, teacher, what large stones and what large buildings." Then Jesus asked him, "Do you see these buildings? Not one stone will be left here upon another, all will be thrown down." When I read today's gospel passage, the image of the Crown building in Barangaroo came to my mind. It is very tall and very imposing and can be seen from many places around Sydney. In fact, you can actually see it from the windows at the back of the manse, and on a clear, dark night, you can see its light shining. For some of us, it is a magnificent architectural wonder, and for others of us, it is an eyesore and has become a symbol of money and power and rich people getting what they want. What large stones and what large buildings. This Sunday is the last Sunday that we will be delving into the Gospel of Mark for another 2 years. As many of you are aware, we follow the lectionary, which is a 3-year cycle of Bible reading that begins in Advent and ends next week with Christ the King Sunday. Then we'll farewell Year B and welcome Year C, and our gospel readings change to focus on the Gospel of Luke. Mark's gospel begins strongly with the baptism of Jesus and the descent of the Spirit, marking the beginning of Jesus' public ministry. And his public ministry ends here with a bang, with our reading today. We've become very aware as we've worked our way through Mark that this gospel does not help us feel balanced or safe. Instead, it challenges and it unsettles us. This gospel is about a chaotic world, probably written about the year 70 CE amid great confusion and distress after the siege of Jerusalem, where the Roman army captured and destroyed both the city and its temple. Questions abound. Questions like, where is Jesus? When is he coming back? And how do the Jesus followers continue to bear witness to Jesus in all this chaos and confusion? Today, we find Jesus standing in the temple courtyard with his disciples, shortly after asking them to notice a widow giving her last 2 coins to the temple treasury. And one of the disciples says to Jesus, "Look, teacher, what large stones and what large buildings." According to the 1st century historian Josephus, the Jerusalem temple of Jesus' day was an awe-inspiring wonder. Newly reconstructed by Herod the Great, the temple's retaining walls were made of stones over 12 meters long. The temple itself occupied an area twice as large as the Roman Forum and 4 times as large as the Athenian Acropolis. Herod reportedly used so much gold to cover the outside walls that everyone who gazed at them was literally bedazzled. So understandably, the disciple in the story is impressed, and he tries to share his sense of awe with Jesus. But Jesus isn't dazzled. Instead, he responds to the disciples' remark with a question. Do you see these great buildings, he asks. What the disciple sees is an architectural wonder, but he also sees it as the biggest, boldest, and most unshakable symbol of God's presence he is capable of imagining. For him, those massive stones hold religious memory and tribal identity. They offer the faithful a symbol of spiritual glory and pride and worthiness. In short, what takes the disciples' breath away as he gazes at the temple is not just the shiny gold, but the religious certainty and permanence those glittering stones display to the world. Jesus, however, seems to see something completely different. Jesus sees ruins. He sees rubble. He sees destruction. Fragility, not permanence. Loss, not glory. Change, not equilibrium. Not one stone will be left here upon another, Jesus tells the stunned disciple. All will be thrown down. This passage from Mark's Gospel is often described as apocalyptic and is known as Mark's little apocalypse. Now, when you hear the term apocalypse, your mind may well have taken you to Marvel's superhero movies or vacant-eyed zombies lurching through decimated neighborhoods, or a scene of nuclear destruction, perhaps. But in fact, apocalypse actually means an unveiling or an uncovering, a disclosure of something secret and hidden. To experience an apocalypse is to experience fresh sight. It is to understand reality as we've never understood it before. So what fresh understanding or way of seeing is Jesus offering his disciples in this apocalyptic vision? He invites them, I think, to look beyond the grandeur of the temple, to see that the temple is not the epicenter of God's work of salvation. God is not bound by mortar and stone. God is bigger than every person-made building, every institution, every church, and every symbol human beings create in God's name. We human beings get so easily seduced by the biggest and the newest and the shiniest. Look, teacher, what large stones and what large buildings. The disciple seems to also be voicing our frailty and deception. Barbara Brown Taylor, in her sermon collection, God in Pain, argues that disillusionment is essential to the Christian life. She says this: disillusionment is literally the loss of an illusion about ourselves, about the world, about God. And while it is almost always a painful thing, it is never a bad thing to lose the lies we have mistaken for the truth. It is never a bad thing to lose the lies we have mistaken for the truth. I wonder then what lies and illusions we mistake for the truth. I wonder in what memories or traditions or comfort zones we too attempt to house God. There are things that we love and things that we build and things we strive for and pray for. Are we willing to sit with the fact that sometimes these things need to fall apart? James, John, and Andrew asked him privately, "Tell us, when will this be, and what will be the sign that all these things are about to be accomplished?" Then Jesus began to say to them, "Beware that no one leads you astray. Many will come in my name and say, 'I am he,' and they will lead many astray. When you hear of wars and rumors of wars, do not be alarmed. This must take place, but the end is still to come. For nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. There will be earthquakes in various places. There will be famines. This is but the beginning of the birth pangs." In the second part of the gospel story, Jesus teaches his disciples what to do and how to live when the walls do come tumbling down. I don't know about you, but these images stir in me a level of panic and fear and a desire to hide away. This all sounds pretty alarming and dangerous, Jesus, and we are scared. But Jesus responds, "Don't be alarmed," he says, "when truth is shaken and nations make war and impostors preach alluring gospels of fear, resentment, and hatred. Don't give in to the terror. Don't despair. Because this is right where we need to be, living in the chaos, working for God's kingdom, making peace, choosing hope, cultivating patience, and incarnating love as the world reels and changes. To bear the chaos and the change with the radical self-sacrificial love Jesus models on the cross. For many of us, we may feel we are already experiencing apocalypse. Things feel pretty chaotic right now, don't they, in this pandemic? And as we look at the polarization and division here in Australia, the devastating effects of climate change, and the terrible events across the globe of famine and fire and war and violence, we may well be feeling that the apocalypse is already upon us and has been for a long time. Just living in the pandemic and the different ways that it has affected those in our community and across the world leaves us emotionally and spiritually exhausted. In this troubling context, it's easy to despair or to grow numb or to let feelings of overwhelmedness and exhaustion win. Yet, believe it or not, held in our story today is an incredible call for hope. Those of us who have ever given birth or been involved in a birth, either as a midwife, and I know there are quite a few of those in our congregation, or as a support person, know that we have experienced or witnessed something extraordinary and quite paradoxical. The pain of childbirth often lasts many hours and for some days, and it's overwhelming and exhausting and it's scary and many other things as well. Yet we know that in most times, sadly not all times, this intense and seemingly never-ending pain ends with a baby. It ends with new birth. What is so painful leads to something incredibly joyous and wonderful, new life. And right at the end of our reading today, Jesus makes this promise. This is but the beginning of the birth pangs, he says. It's not about death, it's about birth. Something is struggling to be born. Yes, the birth pangs hurt. They hurt so much that we feel like we'll not survive. But God is our midwife, and what God births will never lead to desolation. Yes, we are called to bear witness in the ruins, but there is hope because these birth pangs will end in joy. It's precisely now, when the world around us feels the most apocalyptic, that we are called to respond with resilient healing and love. Whatever chaos we are living through, Jesus will return and justice will be restored, and we too will exult in the Lord with Hannah in her prayer from the Hebrew Scriptures today. The bows of the mighty are broken, but the feeble gird on strength. The Lord makes poor and makes rich. The Lord brings low and also exalts. The Lord raises up the poor from the dust and lifts the needy from the ash heap, to make them sit with princes and inherit a seat of honor. For the pillars of the earth are the Lord's, and on them God has set the world. Amen. Let's have a moment of stillness.